Imagine this for a second. The noise of your day has finally stopped. There's literally nothing left to do, and there's no one left to perform for. And right there, in that quiet, a persistent little thought creeps in. It's that feeling that everyone else has already begun their lives. And you, well, you're still standing at the starting gate. If you've ever felt that way at the end of a long day, well, this explainer is exactly for you. Take a breath and let's dive into it.
Everyone else has already begun, and you are still standing at the gate. This isn't just some passing abstract thought, is it? It's a visceral, bodily feeling. You've probably felt it sitting in the crowd at other people's graduations, or maybe at weddings, where, you're genuinely thrilled for your friends, but you're quietly feeling a bit empty for yourself. You feel it when you're just endlessly scrolling through life announcements on your phone, the new job title, the new house, that easy certainty in someone's voice. And you register something that isn't quite envy, but it isn't quite sadness either. It's just this heavy, nameless weight. It really is the feeling that a race started somewhere completely without you. It's like the gun went off while you were still kneeling down tying your shoes. So how do we cope with this kind of tension? Well, we usually make gentle excuses for ourselves. We say things like, oh, it simply hasn't been my turn yet. But then, in our most honest, quietest moments, we start to fear that we aren't just waiting. We fear we're actually failing. But what's deeply resonant here is that there's actually a third option. It's not a lie that you're secretly ahead, and it's definitely not the fear that you're failing. Let's see how this builds into something completely different.
The real answer actually lies in a concept called individuation. The brilliant Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung spent about 40 years trying to describe this exact phenomenon. Jung noticed that we spend the first part of our lives building a self that the world will accept. We learn what to chase, and we essentially build a version of ourselves designed purely for approval. And for a great many people, that version holds up beautifully. It carries them for decades. But Jung explained that for some of us, that approved self just never quite fits. And he didn't see that as a defect at all. He called the deeper process beneath it individuation. It's the slow becoming of who you actually are beneath that version built for approval. And here's the absolute most important part of this. It runs on its own unique clock. Not the world's clock, yours. So let's look closely at what that clock is actually doing during those years that might feel like you're just standing perfectly still.
Section 1. The map in your hands, drawn for someone else.
Think about how this map works for most people. They're handed a conventional life map really early on. Finish school, get this specific job, buy a house by this specific age. They follow it, the landmarks appear roughly where the map promised they would, and so they trust it and they keep walking. But for you, maybe every single time you tried to follow that map, something inside you just went quiet and heavy, kind of like a compass needle refusing to point forward. The destinations that everyone else longed for just left you feeling cold. The milestones that were supposed to feel like arriving somewhere, they just felt like putting on a costume. We can really see why this happens by looking at two different kinds of travelers. The first kind of traveler becomes themselves by joining the world, absorbing it and saying yes quickly. The standard map works perfectly for them. But then we have the second kind of traveler, and if you've been feeling behind, you are very likely this second kind. You become yourself by questioning things, by pausing at the threshold. You need to know that a door is truly yours before you will ever walk through it. A map made for that first traveler, it will always feel like a lie to the second. So remember, it's not that you're broken, you are just navigating a completely different terrain.
Section 2. What everyone called drifting, your mind called refusing.
From the outside looking in, maybe your 20s look like wandering. You started things and you left them. You changed directions. You stood at the crossroads long after everyone else picked a path and walked happily off down it. People might have called it indecision or maybe a lack of ambition. Honestly, you might have even called it that yourself on the tough nights. But that wandering, it was not indecision. It was actually an involuntary, quiet refusal of a life that simply did not fit you. As the saying goes, what looked like you failing to commit was you refusing to sign a contract written in someone else's name. Jung believed that your psyche will quietly sabotage a future that would cost you your true self. It rejects what isn't yours, literally just like a body rejects a mismatched transplant. And yeah, that refusal was expensive. It cost you years, it cost you the comfort of belonging on time, but it protected something invaluable. It protected the self that was still very slowly being made.
Section 3. The empty years were not empty. They were the apprenticeship. While other people were out there building visible outward milestones, the careers, the partnerships, the social proof, you were doing something entirely different. You were doing heavy, invisible work. You were taking your own foundations apart to see if they would actually hold.
And you are doing this by asking profound, usually unasked questions. Who am I underneath what I was told to be? What in me is actually mine? What did I simply inherit and never really examine? What have I been pretending not to know? Most people don't ask these questions until a massive crisis forces them to, decades later in life. But asking these questions naturally slows the life down. You literally cannot sprint on the fast track while you are actively dismantling your borrowed ground. Jung observed that people who skip these questions often arrive at midlife with everything the map promised, but with a strange hollowness. Everything is there, sure, but the person living it is not. You, however, are just paying that bill early.
You were apprenticed to something slower. I really want you to stop and just absorb this possibility for a second. If you've spent years feeling late, out of step, or behind, like there was a secret door everyone else found that you didn't even see, consider that you were never actually late at all. The years that looked like a waste were actually years of deep work, happening in a place no one could photograph or post on social media. You weren't falling behind the others, you were going somewhere most of them will never have the patience to reach.
Section 4. The aloneness was the workshop, not the wound. Let's be real for a moment. This part is deeply painful to acknowledge. When you carry a dense, strange, and alive inner world, ordinary connection can sometimes feel thinner than silence. You can be standing in a room full of people who genuinely like you and still feel totally unreachable. And so you might pull back inwardly into a quiet solitude. Sadly, that solitude is so easily misread by others as distance or coldness, or even as a sign that something is fundamentally wrong with you. But the ones who can stay in the solitude without surrendering to it find that it was never only emptiness, it was a workshop. Jung saw this phase of life as an absolutely crucial hinge. Many people break right here. The aloneness gets unbearable, so they just surrender. They trade their forming self for the relief of finally fitting in somewhere. They go loud on the outside, quiet on the inside, and they spend the rest of their lives resenting it. But if you can stay in the quiet, without an audience to perform for, you finally begin to hear what you actually think. You build a self with true, unperformed weight. Section 5. You will not arrive ready. You will arrive real. Somewhere in the middle of life, the ground just changes. There's no fanfare. There's no big announcement like early success usually gets. Just a slow, quiet settling. The background anxiety that hummed under everything for so long finally begins to quiet down. That endless measuring of yourself against other people, it loosens its grip, and you are left with the feeling of being one whole person, at last, instead of a committee of other people's expectations. Because your self was assembled slowly, in private, through years of work that absolutely no one applauded, it holds. Your choices become clean because they come from actually knowing yourself, rather than just fearing the alternatives. You find a quiet steadiness, and this isn't just some performed confidence that can shatter under pressure. It is something much, much harder to break.
As the saying goes, slow water carves the deepest canyons. Some lives are made that way on purpose. Jung truly believed this kind of self is rare. A life deliberately built this way doesn't quietly rot from the inside out, because it is actually undeniably yours. So if you've been carrying the word late around for years, feeling its weight, I gently encourage you to set it down right now. You were just borrowing a word from a race you were never actually running. So, I want to leave you with this question. Ask yourself, what is the part of your own long, quiet road that you have never quite been able to explain? Really think about that. Because no matter how it feels, you are not alone on this slow way. There are others out there navigating their own unmapped terrains, doing the deep, invisible work right alongside you. Thank you so much for spending this quiet time with this explainer. Keep going at your own pace.